Hello and welcome. My name is Kurt Watinsky, and this is the first in a series of interviews I'll be conducting with local leaders as part of the More Housing Wisconsin project, which is sponsored by the Wisconsin Realtors Association, Wisconsin Builders Association, and the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. The focus of these series of interviews is on housing, and in particular on how to generate more, mainly workforce, but all types of housing in our communities across the state of Wisconsin that need more housing. And there are a lot of communities that need more housing. We will be talking with and learning from local leaders, both from the public sector and the private sector, who have developed and implemented strategies, programs, policy changes that generated more housing for their community. And with me this morning is Adam Sonntag, who is the city administrator for the city of Ripon. And Adam, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate you being here.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for inviting me and talking about this critical issue.
Great. So I reached out to you because I know in the two cities you've worked for in the last 20 years, that we've known each other. It's a long time. Uh, Hillsborough and now Ripon,
Yep.
housing, or the shortage of housing rather, has been a critical issue in both those communities that you've had to deal with. And I wanted to zero in on kind of the beginning points of realizing that both in those two communities that, without more housing, it's impossible to attract, new people, new families, people who want to work here, aren't able to live here, all those issues. How did you first kind of confirm, both in Hillsborough and in the city you're currently at, Ripon, that yeah, we have a housing need here?
Yeah, I think in both communities, the common element was data. Just looking at the number of like new home builds or number of added units, and seeing that we're not necessarily keeping up with other periods in time and/or with the demand or what others in maybe the region or area are keeping up with or doing. And the second is just talking to people. Frankly, the story I think is equally as important as the data. And when you have employers, particularly in Ripon now, that are large, worldwide corporations that employ, thousands of people in your community, and they're saying, we're really, really struggling with this. So those stories matter. Sometimes too, it's your own personal story as a city administrator coming into my community and moving in the last couple of years. It was a challenge. I mean, it's your own experience. If you're struggling to find housing in the community you work for, there's got to be more people, and so I think that those combination of things really sort of start painting a picture, and telling a story that you need to start addressing. So
What, zeroing in on the data collection, did your communities contract with an agency to kind of perform a housing needs assessment? How did that happen, or how did you
yep,
collect the
yep.
data? Yeah.
Yep. So in both cases, what we did we worked with the company Veerbecker to do housing study analysis, so a market analysis. My first one was in Hillsborough, and then I did the same thing after I got here shortly in Ripon. And you had the understanding that there was a shortage or there were issues within your community, and you can kind of look at some data, but when you hire a firm like that, or you hire a study to be done, you can really start to better understand, number of units you need, where your growth is, what the demand is. They engage, they'll go and engage, community members and organizations to get feedback, and it just kind of puts together a far better, report, frankly, or
Hmm.
study on the totality of the challenges within the community. So in both cases, we got strong data on demographics, on type of housing, on where people are lacking options or their affordability gaps, and ultimately then how many housing units do we need? Because some communities, they may need hundreds, some may need just 10, right? So in both cases, in Hillsborough it was like 32, and in Ripon it was about 120. At the end of the day, that's what we needed, based on the hard crunching data.
Hmm. Hmm. What did so you in both communities, you have this report. It kind of confirms for you what your situation is, what the status quo is. What How did you go about maybe trying to change that status quo or accomplish the generating more housing, working with the private sector to generate more housing? What are some maybe strategies or first steps that you implemented in either Hillsborough or Ripon?
Yeah, so I think the first step is being very public with the data and telling the story, the continuation of the story. So, in Ripon's case, we finished the report. We had some identified areas of affordability, like low income or first time home buyers. We had some data in the report or suggestions in the report to use certain lands that otherwise wouldn't be developed for housing in a former master plan. Like, let's think about putting that up for sale or developing that for housing. So it's really just looking at all of your assets in the community, from land to, dollars, and begin putting in programming to help some of these challenges, as well as, frankly, in Ripon's case, we did the housing study. It ran in the paper, and about 3 weeks later, I had 4 or 5 inquiries about housing development in the community. So that doesn't always work, but certainly the ability to tell the story and do that report and use the data to then give the developer to say, hey, we've done the numbers. You can certainly take it or and refine it, but we've done a lot of the work for you. Here it is. It elevates it, or it allows it to have a little more credibility, right? Instead of just saying, well, I think we need housing, to say we need 110 units
Yeah.
and the whole data report behind it. It's sort of just, in our case, we kind of fell into some things, but ultimately following that up with programs, to offer either incentives or reduced lot sales, whatever. There are tons of different strategies. Really taking that data and the problems you've identified and putting money toward them is where we went with it. So it's a lot of work, but
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I really just want to wind this up by thanking you for participating in this interview today. Appreciate it very much.
yeah, and the city of Ripon, we have tons of our information, our housing study online. If people want to look at it, see kind of what you're getting into, certainly it's all publicly available, and we encourage people to see kind of what we're doing. And I would encourage people to rip off everybody's ideas, because it's far easier than trying to recreate the wheel. But certainly here to help. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Adam. Check out our Housing Ready checklist for municipalities on the League of Wisconsin Municipalities website under the Housing tab. Also, join me next month as I talk with land use planning expert Brian Ohm on first steps a community can take to addressing their housing shortage. We'll focus in on developing a housing needs assessment and preparing a local housing strategy. See you next month.